At 26,000 feet on Everest, the world shrinks to three things: the crunch of your crampons, the burn in your lungs, and the thin line of rope that decides whether you live or vanish into white nothing. That night, the fog came in like a living wall, thick, soundless, swallowing headlamps, until their beams died a few feet in front of our faces. We moved anyway, because above the South Col, you don't wait it out. You either climb, or the mountain climbs into you. My radio crackled once, just a dry pop. Then a voice slipped through that was not on our channel, not a shout, not static. A slow, breathy syllable that sounded like it was being spoken from inside my own hood. I raised the handset, trying to answer, trying to confirm it was our Sherpa team. Anything normal. That's when Dorje, our guide, spun around so fast his oxygen line snapped tight. He grabbed my wrist hard enough to hurt through 3 layers of glove, ripped the radio from my hand, and pressed it against his chest like it was a lit flare. His eyes were wide, locked on the fog behind me. "Don't!" he hissed. "No voice, no name!" I tried to laugh, some stupid reflex, but the sound died in my throat when the snow beneath our boots began to vibrate, not from wind, from weight. Something huge moved through the fog uphill of us, close enough that the air changed, dense, heavy, as if the mountain itself had leaned in to listen. Dorje's mouth was right beside my ear now, trembling with urgency. "If it hears you," he whispered, "it's over. The story you just heard is a fictional narrative created for entertainment. You don't come to Everest for comfort. You come because some part of you believes the edge of the world will finally answer questions that ordinary life never touches." For me, it started as a promise to myself after a year of losses. One funeral, one broken relationship, and a quiet emptiness that followed me into every room. I wanted a single moment that felt undeniably alive, something that couldn't be scrolled past or forgotten. So I trained. I saved. I signed the papers that list all the ways you can die above 8,000 meters, and I told everyone I was chasing a dream. The truth was uglier. I was chasing silence, and hoping it wouldn't swallow me back. Our expedition was professional, cautious, and methodical. We had weather windows, fixed lines, oxygen caches, and a guide with a reputation for bringing people home. Dorje wasn't theatrical. He was the kind of man who spoke only when words mattered, until that foggy night when he treated a simple radio like a weapon. Because on Everest, the mountain doesn't need monsters to kill you. The cold will do it. The altitude will do it. Exhaustion will do it. But what happened to us on that ridge didn't feel like weather or physics. It felt like we'd stepped into a rule we didn't know existed, one the locals understood without ever having to explain it. And if you've ever wondered what you do when the most dangerous thing isn't the climb, but the moment you realize something out there might be listening, then stay with me. Before we go any higher, make sure you're subscribed. Leave a like if you want more survival expeditions like this, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Because this story moves from the South Col into the fog, and then into something far worse. One decision at a time. When you authorize me, I'll begin Chapter 1. Also, what final video title do you want to use exactly? The one you sent is strong. I can keep it verbatim. We left Camp 4 at the South Col with the kind of discipline that looks calm from a distance and feels like panic up close. Everything you do above 26,000 feet is slow, deliberate, and brutal, like trying to assemble your life with numb fingers while someone tightens a belt around your chest. My name is Ethan Caldwell, 46 years old. Not an influencer, not a professional climber, just a man who spent most of his life behind a desk and decided too late that he wanted proof he had been brave at least once. Dorje led from the front, clipped into the fixed line with a smooth economy that made the rest of us look like children in oversized suits. Behind him were 2 Sherpas, Tashi and Pemba, moving with that quiet competence that makes you trust them even when your body is screaming. Then came the clients. Me, a former Marine named Grant Holloway, and a British surgeon, Dr. Lena Shah, who had the calm eyes of someone who had watched blood and panic and learned how to keep her hands steady. The wind had been manageable when we started, a steady shove rather than a slap. But the fog was wrong. It wasn't the normal cloud that rolls in and out like a curtain. This was thick and low, crawling uphill against the wind as if it had a destination. Our headlamps turned it into a glowing wall. The beam didn't travel, it just lit up the whiteness in front of our faces, a few feet of snow crystals spinning like tiny insects. Dorje stopped and held up a gloved fist. All movement froze. Even the clinking of carabiners seemed to hush. He listened. At first I heard nothing, then, faint, almost beneath perception, a low vibration that made the ice under my boots feel less like ground and more like a drumhead. I told myself it was wind moving under a crust of snow, a harmless trick of the mountain, but Dorje didn't move. He slowly turned his head, looking not at the trail ahead, but into the fog off to our left, where the slope fell away into nothing. He leaned back toward us. "No talking," he said. His English was clipped, careful. "Keep breath inside." Grant shifted his weight, annoyed. "You worried about frostbite or avalanche?" Dorje didn't answer him. He looked at me instead, as if he'd already decided I was the one who might make a mistake. "Radio off," he said quietly. I glanced down at my chest harness where the handheld was clipped. "We need comms." Dorje's eyes stayed fixed. "Not now." Lena nodded without argument. She reached up and turned her own set off, the movement slow and precise. Grant hesitated, then did the same. I followed, though every modern instinct in me hated it. On a mountain that kills through isolation, you don't turn off your lifeline. But Dorje's face said something else. This wasn't about the mountain. We moved again, step, clip. My oxygen mask hissed and rasped. I could taste plastic and cold. The rope led us upward toward the triangular face and the balcony, though in the fog there was no toward. There was only what the rope allowed. The vibration came back, subtle but steady, like a distant engine that never quite arrived. It threaded itself into my bones. Once I noticed it, I couldn't unnotice it. I tried to keep my eyes on Dorje's boots. The rhythm mattered. You follow the rhythm, you survive. Lose it, you stumble, you freeze, you become a story someone else tells. Then my radio crackled. It was faint, almost like the first twitch of a dying battery. A pop, then a thin line of sound, so quiet I wondered if it was inside my own head. I froze. Dorje didn't. He snapped around and looked straight at me. I reached for the radio without thinking. I wanted confirmation. I wanted to hear a familiar voice. I wanted the world to make sense again. The moment my glove touched the handset, a syllable formed in the speaker. Not a name, not a word I recognized. Just a breathy sound shaped like speech. Dorje lunged. His movement was so fast, it seemed impossible at this altitude. He grabbed my wrist, yanked the radio free, and pressed it against his chest. "Don't," he whispered, so close I could smell the stale oxygen and sweat trapped in his mask. No voice, no name. My heart hammered in my ears. What was that? Dorje didn't answer. He leaned past me, staring into the fog behind our line. That's when the vibration changed. It deepened. The snow under my boots trembled, not violently, but with a steady pulse, weight moving somewhere close, crossing ice, shifting mass. Grant noticed too. He turned his head sharply. "What the hell?" Dorje snapped his hand up, palm out, a command so absolute it silenced Grant mid-word. Dorje's eyes were huge, filled with something I hadn't seen yet on the mountain, fear that was old, practiced, and personal. "If it hears you," Dorje whispered, "it's over." We stood in a line on the fixed rope, 5 human beings anchored to a thin cord, surrounded by fog thick as wool. Our headlamps made halos, but the light couldn't pierce more than a few feet. Something moved out there. Not wind, not snow. The fog swelled as if a body had pressed into it from the other side, and for one terrible second I saw a shape, not clear, not defined, but massive, taller than a man, broad, a darker density where density shouldn't exist. The air seemed to bend around it. My mouth went dry. My first instinct was to shout, to call out, to demand, "Who's there?" like that would make the universe obey. Dorje gripped the rope, knuckles whitening under his gloves. Lena's voice came through her mask in a controlled whisper. "Dorje, what is it?" He didn't look at her. He didn't even blink. "Keep eyes down," he murmured. "No light on it." Grant's headlamp shifted slightly as he turned, and the beam cut into the fog at an angle. The shape reacted. The fog rippled, and the vibration beneath our feet surged as if something had pivoted toward us. Dorje slapped his hand against Grant's chest, pushing his lamp downward. Grant bristled, angry even in terror. "Don't touch my—" Dorje leaned in, voice low and sharp. "You want summit. You want home. Then shut mouth." The shape drew closer. I couldn't see it, so much as feel it. Pressure on my skin, a heaviness in the air. And then, from somewhere in the fog, near enough that the sound seemed to originate inside my hood, came a second radio crackle, not from my handset. Dorje still had it pinned to his chest. This sound came from the fog itself. A crisp burst of static followed by a soft, deliberate click, like someone pressing a transmit button. Lena's eyes widened. "No!" Grant swallowed hard. Even he had gone quiet now. The click came again. Then, through the fog, a voice, not fully formed, not loud, but undeniably human in shape. It sounded like a man trying to imitate the way men speak. Then my blood turned to ice. Because I had never said my name into the radio on this climb. I hadn't needed to. Dorje knew it. The team knew it. But I hadn't spoken it into the comms, not once. Dorje's gaze snapped to me, furious and terrified at the same time. He shook his head slowly, warning me with every ounce of his being. I pressed my tongue to the roof of my mouth to keep it still. The voice breathed again, shaping syllables carefully, as if tasting them. "Ethan called." It couldn't know my last name. The fog swelled closer. My headlamp beam shook with the tremor in my hands. Dorje did the only thing that made sense in a world that had stopped making sense. He unclipped the radio from his chest and with one swift motion tore the battery pack free. The handset died instantly. Silence. The vibration under our boots paused, as if the mountain itself had held its breath. Then the fog moved again. Fast. Something passed across our path uphill, so close that the air hit me like a wake. A pressure wave. A cold so sharp it bit through layers. I flinched and my gloves scraped ice. The tiny sound, just that scrape, felt impossibly loud. Dorje's eyes widened, and from the fog right beside us came a slow exhale that did not match any human breathing rate. Long, controlled, curious, like something leaning in to smell us. Grant's shoulders trembled. Lena's lips moved silently, maybe a prayer. Dorje leaned toward me until his mask almost touched mine. "You are thinking it is animal," he whispered. "Not animal." "Then what?" I mouthed, barely moving my jaw. Dorje's eyes flicked to the fog, then back. "Old story," he said, "not for talking, only for living." The fog shifted again, and for a heartbeat the whiteness thinned enough to reveal a suggestion of surface. Dark, uneven, like rock, or fur, or something else entirely. Then it was gone. The vibration receded uphill, fading like thunder moving away. We stood frozen, listening to nothing. Dorje waited a full minute, then another. His breathing remained controlled, but I could see the tension in his neck. Tashi and Pemba said nothing, but their eyes were fixed and wary, like men who had seen this before and hated that it had returned. Finally, Dorje motioned forward. "Move," he whispered. "Now. No stop." We obeyed, because there was nothing else to do. But as I climbed, my mind clung to one impossible fact. The fog had spoken my name. And if it could do that without a radio, then the radio wasn't the danger. It was the invitation. We climbed another 20 minutes in silence, the fog still thick, the wind still low. My legs burned, my lungs felt like they were breathing through a straw, but the fear kept me upright. Then I saw it. Ahead, half buried near the rope line, was a torn oxygen mask, old, sun-bleached, brittle, a length of harness strap frozen into the snow, and beside it a radio handset, not ours. This one was cracked, its casing split open like a skull. Dorje stopped. He stared down at it as if it were a dead animal. Lena leaned closer, her lamp angled low. "Is that from another team?" Dorje didn't answer immediately. He crouched, carefully, like touching it might wake something. He brushed snow away with the edge of his glove. A label emerged under the ice, a name written in black marker on white tape. "Dorje!" My stomach dropped. Grant's voice finally came, rough. "That's your name." Dorje's face tightened. The fog swirled around us like it was listening again, and the cracked radio, dead, battery long gone, clicked once, just once, like a transmit button being pressed by an invisible hand. Dorje stood up very slowly, eyes fixed on the fog beyond our lamps. "Now," he whispered, "we go back." Grant shook his head violently. "Back? We're close. We can push for the balcony." Dorje grabbed the rope and yanked it hard enough to make the line vibrate. "Back," he repeated, voice stronger. "Or you die." Lena looked between them, calculating, deciding, and in that moment of hesitation the fog behind us thickened, and a voice, soft, careful, almost gentle, spoke from somewhere just out of sight. "Dorje." It wasn't through any radio, it was in the air, and Dorje, our unshakable guide, went completely still, as if the mountain had just called him by the one name he didn't want to hear. He closed his eyes for half a second, and when he opened them, he looked older. "Clip in," he whispered to us. "Do not let go." Because whatever had learned our names was no longer uphill. It was behind us. Dorje's command, "back," hit us harder than the cold. On Everest, turning around above the South Col is not a simple choice. It's a trade. You give up the summit and you pray the mountain accepts your surrender. Grant's jaw flexed behind his mask. I could see the stubbornness in his eyes, the same look he wore earlier when Dorje slapped his headlamp down. A lifetime of pushing through pain doesn't vanish just because the air is thin. "We can't just—" Grant started. Dorje cut him off with a look so sharp it felt like a blade. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "You want to argue," Dorje said. "Argue at camp, not here." Lena spoke softly, steady. "Dorje, explain, even one sentence. We need to understand what we're running from." Dorje's gaze flicked toward the fog behind us. It moved in slow folds, as if it had weight. "Not running," he said. "Returning. Respect." That word, respect, hung in the air like a warning sign. Tashi and Pemba were already repositioning, checking carabiners and the line. They weren't debating. Their faces had the same expression, tight, controlled and old with memory. I forced my numb hands to obey. Clip, check, step. The fixed line trembled slightly with every movement, and I hated how loud it felt in my mind. Above us was the invisible route to the balcony and the summit ridge. Behind us was the South Col, a cluster of tents and oxygen caches that felt, suddenly, like the only real place left on Earth. We started down. At first it was just a descent. Careful steps, anchors, focus on the rope. But within minutes, the fog thickened again, smothering our headlamps into a milky glow. The mountain's features disappeared. The world became a narrow tunnel of light and breath. Then, behind us, the voice returned. Not loud, not dramatic, just close enough to be intimate. "Dorje." The syllables shaped themselves with an almost respectful tone, as if addressing an old friend across a room. Dorje's shoulders stiffened. He didn't turn. He didn't answer. Grant's eyes flashed at me. "Are you hearing that?" He didn't have to ask. We all heard it. Lena's breathing quickened, the hiss of oxygen becoming uneven. She forced it back under control. "Don't respond," she whispered, more to herself than to us. I kept my mouth shut so hard my jaw cramped. Another step. Another clip. The fog brushed my shoulders like something physical. I felt the insane urge to shine my headlamp around, to prove there was nothing there, but Dorje's earlier warning echoed in my skull. No light on it. So I aimed my lamp down, into the snow. We moved like that for several minutes, silent, obedient, terrified. Then the radio click came again. Except we had no working radio. I heard it anyway, a clean mechanical tap, like the press of a transmit button. It came from the fog behind us, and it made the hair at the back of my neck rise under layers of fabric. Grant's gloved hand drifted toward his own dead handset, as if he needed to confirm it wasn't him. His fingers hovered, then stopped. He understood the rule now. The devices didn't matter. The fog itself was doing the talking. Dorje leaned back toward us without turning his head. "Look at rope," he whispered. "Only rope." As we descended, something appeared in the fog ahead. Dark shapes at the limit of our headlamps. For one hopeful second, I thought it was the South Col camp. Then the shapes resolved into something worse. A line of torn fabric half buried in snow, like a flag shredded by years of wind. A broken tent pole, a coil of rope frozen stiff, an abandoned site. Lena stopped, lamp angled down. There was a camp here. Dorje didn't answer. He knelt, brushing snow away carefully. Underneath was a patch of ice, scraped smooth, as if someone had paced there over and over, waiting. A few feet away, half buried, was an oxygen bottle, empty, its valve rimed with frost. Grant swore under his breath. Dead climbers' stuff. Dorje's eyes stayed on the ice. "Not dead," he said quietly. "Missing." That word landed like a stone in my stomach. I stared at the abandoned gear, trying to imagine being stuck there in fog like this, low on oxygen, waiting for help that never arrives. A simple, plausible tragedy, until you added the voice in the fog. Pemba pointed to something near the rope line, a boot print, shallow and old, preserved like a fossil. It wandered off the fixed line into the blank whiteness. Lena's voice was tight. "Someone unclipped." Dorje nodded once. "They heard." Grant shook his head. "People hallucinate up here. Hypoxia. They wander. That's—" Dorje stood up sharply, cutting him off. "Not this." And then, from deeper in the fog, we heard a sound that turned my blood to ice. Footsteps, slow, heavy, deliberate, not the skittering of snow in wind, not the crunch of our own crampons. Footsteps approaching on ice. Dorje raised a hand. We froze, attached to the rope like beads on a string. Our headlamps hovered low, obedient. The footsteps came closer. 1, 2, 3. Each step placed with a patience that felt wrong, as if whoever or whatever was walking could afford to take its time. Lena's gloved hand found mine for a brief second, gripping hard. Even through thick fabric, I felt how cold her fingers were. Then a shadow formed in the fog ahead, interrupting the diffuse glow of our headlamps. It stood too tall, too broad. The fog around it seemed to cling. Grant's shoulders lifted like he was preparing to fight, a laughable instinct at this altitude and on this terrain. Dorje's posture, in contrast, was that of a man facing a storm, still braced, knowing resistance is meaningless. The shadow stopped. In the silence, I heard my own pulse, loud as a drum. And then the voice came again, closer than before, as if it had leaned down to our level. "Ethan," my name, spoken with careful precision. I felt Grant's head turn toward me, even though he didn't dare lift his lamp. I wanted to vanish inside my down suit. I wanted to become anonymous, faceless, unheard. Dorje whispered without moving his lips, "Do not answer." The shadow shifted slightly, and the fog parted for an instant. I saw the outline of a human figure, a climber, a man in an old-style suit, faded, patched, the kind of gear you'd see in photos from earlier decades. His oxygen mask hung loose against his chest. Frost coated his hood like grey fur. He was clipped to nothing. His headlamp was off. He stood with his face angled down as if listening for our breathing. Grant's voice came out as a rasp. That's a person." Dorje's answer was barely audible. "No!" The man lifted his chin, and even in that blurred, fog-muted moment, I saw the eyes, not dead, not alive, just empty, reflecting light like glass. Then the fog closed again, swallowing him whole, and the footsteps continued, past us, brushing so close I felt a pressure change, a cold wake, as if a door had opened onto space. Something moved along the rope line behind our backs, and I had to fight the insane urge to spin and shine my lamp straight into it. Because Dorje had said, "No light on it." The footsteps faded into the fog downhill. We stood there, shaking, until Dorje signaled forward again. We moved faster now, as fast as you can move at 8,000 meters without collapsing. The rope hummed under tension. My thighs screamed. My lungs felt like paper. After what felt like hours, the fog thinned slightly and a darker mass appeared ahead. The rise of the South Col, the faint silhouettes of tents. A wave of relief hit me so hard I nearly cried. Then I heard a voice from camp, real this time, human, distant. "Dorje! Dorje!" A Sherpa from another team, his headlamp bright, waved as we approached. "Weather turning. You okay?" Dorje didn't answer immediately. He kept his lamp low until we were almost at the tents, until the fog behind us felt a fraction less alive. Finally, he turned to the man. "We go down," he said. The other Sherpa frowned. "Down? Summit window open. Many teams go." Dorje's face remained hard. "We go down now." Grant stepped forward, anger rising. "We're not going down because of a ghost story. Dorje, we've trained for this. We're close." Dorje swung toward him. Even through the mask, his voice came out like iron. "You think I'm scared of story? I'm scared of mistake." Grant jabbed a gloved finger downhill. "Mistake is quitting." Dorje leaned in close to him. "Mistake is talking when you should be quiet. Mistake is looking when you should look down. Mistake is thinking mountain only kills with cold." Lena stepped between them, palms slightly raised. "Stop, both of you." She looked at Dorje. "What did we see?" Dorje stared at the tent fabric flapping weakly in the wind. His silence stretched long enough that I wondered if he would refuse to explain at all. Then quietly he said, "You saw what happens when it learns you." I swallowed. "Learns us how?" Dorje's eyes met mine. "Names, breath, voice, all same." He tapped his chest lightly. "It listens." Grant laughed once, harsh. "It? What is it? A person? A team messing with us? Radios bouncing off the ridge?" Dorje didn't flinch. "Radio is just tool. It can do without." Lena's gaze narrowed. "Why did it say your name?" Dorje's jaw tightened. He looked away, as if the memory itself was a hazard. "Long time ago," he said. "First season I guide. Another Dorje on mountain. Many Dorje, many Tashi, many names repeated." I didn't like where this was going. Dorje continued, voice low. "We were above South Col. Fog like tonight. Client American, good man. He had radio. He spoke too much. He joked. He said names. He said my name many times." Grant's face hardened, but he stayed silent now. Dorje stared at his gloves. Fog answered. "Not on radio, in air. It said my name, like friend, like brother." He paused. Then it said client name. Then it said Sherpa name. It made us look, one by one. We looked. A coldness spread through my chest that had nothing to do with altitude. "What happened?" Lena asked. Dorje's eyes lifted. "We lost one Sherpa. He unclipped. He walked into fog. We pulled rope until hands bled. Nothing. Next morning we found radio. It had my name. Like you saw tonight. Grant exhaled slowly. The anger in him had shifted into something else, calculation perhaps, or dread. You're saying it takes people, Grant said. Dorje's answer was a whisper. I don't know takes. I only know mountain returns nothing. The camp around us felt suddenly fragile, thin nylon, aluminum poles, oxygen bottles lined up like a last prayer. And beyond the tents, the fog waited. Lena made a decision quickly. We descend to Camp 3, at least, she said. We reassess lower. Grant's eyes flicked toward the invisible route above. I saw the tug of war inside him, summit fever against the primal message his body had just received. I didn't come here to run from stories, he muttered. Dorje's voice sharpened. Then you die for pride, not for summit. Grant looked like he might argue again, until the fog behind the tents shifted, and every headlamp beam seemed to dim, not because the batteries failed, but because the air itself thickened. We all felt it. A pressure, a hush. Even the wind seemed to pause. The Sherpa from the other team frowned. What is? Dorje raised his hand again, a silent command. And out beyond the tents, where the fog pooled like milk in a bowl, a single headlamp turned on. A bright white circle of light, hovering at human height, perfectly steady, no beam swinging, no jittering movement, just a calm, fixed light, pointed directly at our camp. Lena's voice was barely audible. That's someone out there. Grant leaned forward instinctively. Hey, who's there? Dorje slammed his hand against Grant's chest, shoving him back so hard he stumbled into a tent line. No! But it was too late. Grant had spoken into the open air. His voice had carried. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the headlamp outside the camp blinked once, twice, like a signal being returned. And from the fog, a voice answered, perfectly timed, perfectly shaped, using Grant's own tone like a borrowed coat. Hey, who's there? Grant went pale, because the voice didn't echo like a human calling through fog. It sounded close, right at the edge of the tents. Dorje grabbed Grant by the harness and hauled him backward. Pack now! Dorje hissed to all of us. Leave everything not needed now! We tore at zippers with stiff fingers. I shoved spare gloves into my suit. Lena grabbed medical supplies and a small oxygen canister. Tashi and Pemba moved with ruthless efficiency, stripping the camp down to survival essentials. Outside, the headlamp remained steady. Then it began to move. Slowly, smoothly, circling the perimeter of the tents, never stepping into the light, never revealing a body. Just the lamp glow sliding through fog like an eye looking for a door. Grant's breathing became ragged, bordering on panic. It's a person. It has to be. Lena snapped at him, controlled but fierce. Then why is it copying you? Dorje didn't waste breath on argument. He shoved a coil of rope into my hands. You hold this, he ordered. If someone fall, you pull. I nodded. Though my hands were shaking badly enough, I almost dropped it. We clipped in one by one, leaving behind expensive gear and summit dreams like offerings. Dorje took the lead, guiding us out of the tent cluster and back onto the fixed line for descent. As we stepped away from camp, the headlamp outside the fog stopped moving. It turned slowly and faced us directly. And then it switched off. Total darkness beyond our lamps. The kind of darkness that makes your imagination feral. We moved downhill faster than we should have, but controlled. Step, clip, step, clip. My lungs burned. My mind screamed for daylight, for visibility, for anything normal. Half an hour down, the fog thickened again. And now behind us, I heard not one set of footsteps, but several, measured, patient, matching our pace. Lena glanced back once, just her eyes, not her lamp, and I saw terror flare in her usually calm expression. Dorje, she whispered. How many? Dorje didn't answer. He lifted his hand, signaling us to tighten spacing, to keep the rope between us like a spinal cord. The footsteps multiplied, closer now, as if whatever was following had finally decided we were worth the effort. Then, just as my legs began to wobble from fatigue, the fixed line ahead dipped sharply, an ice step leading into a steeper section toward Camp the Thur. Dorje descended first, then Tashi, then Pemba. I went next, careful, lowering myself down the step. Grant followed, then Lena. As Lena shifted her weight, a metallic snap cracked through the fog, sharp and unmistakable. Her carabiner. It slipped. For a split second, she hung by one point, her boots scraping for purchase. I reached out, grabbing her harness, the rope coil jerking in my hands. Lena gasped, one sudden inhale, loud in the thin air. And from the fog behind us, instantly, a chorus of voices inhaled too, perfectly synchronized, as if something had been waiting for that exact sound. Dorje whipped his head around. His eyes went wide with a fear I hadn't seen yet, worse than before, because now it wasn't just listening. Now it was answering. And as I hauled Lena back onto the step, the fog behind us parted just enough for me to see multiple headlamps, steady, white, unmoving, lined up in a quiet arc, like a group of climbers standing shoulder to shoulder. Except none of them breathed like humans. None of them shifted their weight. They just stood there, lights aimed at us, as if deciding which name to say next. Dorje's voice came out as a broken whisper. "Do not fall again," he said. "Next time, it comes closer." And then, from the center of those lights, a calm voice spoke. Soft, familiar, devastating. "Dorje." The voice sounded like Dorje's own. And Dorje, for the first time since we left the South Col, hesitated. Just one heartbeat, like the mountain had found the exact key to unlock him. He took one step backward toward the lights. I grabbed the rope hard enough my fingers cramped. "Dorje!" I shouted without thinking. The moment my voice left my mouth, every headlamp in the fog turned, together, directly toward me. And in the white glare, I realized I had just done the one thing he begged me not to do. I had made myself easy to find. The instant my shout cut through the fog, every headlamp out there swung toward me as one, white circles of light snapping into alignment with a precision that didn't belong to tired climbers in thin air. The beams didn't wobble, they didn't hunt. They simply locked onto my position, steady as a camera on a tripod, and the fog around them seemed to tighten like a fist. My mouth went numb with regret. Dorje's head jerked toward me, and in his eyes I saw not anger, not blame. Something worse. Resignation, like I'd just stepped on a landmine he'd been trying to lead us around for years. "Down," he rasped. "Now!" He didn't wait for agreement. He dropped his weight onto the line and started descending the ice step with a speed that felt reckless at this altitude, but his hands were sure and his movements had the hard rhythm of necessity. Tashi and Pemba followed, then me, then Grant, then Lena, each of us sliding down into the steeper section as the lights behind us held, silent and watching. I kept my headlamp pointed at my boots, but I could still feel the glare from behind, like a heatless sun at my back. My mind replayed the single syllable, Dorje, and the way the fog had reacted, like a creature hearing its name. Lena's breathing was ragged again. I could hear her forcing herself into control, inhale by inhale, as if she were stitching her sanity together with discipline. Grant, usually so loud in his body language, had gone rigid. He moved, but his shoulders were high, his hands clamped too tightly on the rope. A man who'd fought wars and thought he understood fear, learning the shape of a new one. We dropped another 50 feet, then another. The fixed line dipped and rose over uneven ice, and the fog flowed around us in thick sheets. Behind us, the headlamps began to follow, not rushing, not chasing, accompanying. The lights stayed a constant distance away, 20 meters, maybe 30, close enough to remind us we were not alone, far enough to keep the outline hidden. Every now and then, a faint crunch suggested footsteps, but I never heard the irregular, human rhythm of someone struggling with crampons. It was too steady, too patient. Dorje signaled us to close distance, nearly shoulder to shoulder on the line. "No gap," he whispered. "No alone." His voice sounded strained, like he was speaking through pain, and I realized he was fighting something internal, not just navigating the descent. The fog had called him in his own voice. It had pulled on whatever memory lived behind his eyes. We hit a small traverse where the rope cut across a sloping ice field. To our right, the mountain disappeared into whiteness. To our left, the slope rose sharply, a wall of ice that looked like frozen smoke. Dorje stopped abruptly and pressed his gloved hand against the line, feeling it, listening through touch. He leaned close to the rope, as if it might whisper something only he could hear. Tashi murmured something in Nepali. Pemba answered, voice low and urgent. Their words were lost in wind and mask, but their tone was unmistakable. Warning. Dorje turned back to us. When we cross, he said quietly, no talking, not even whisper. If you need help, pull rope, only rope. Grant's eyes narrowed. He wanted to argue, but he didn't, not after hearing his own voice echoed in the fog. He nodded once, stiff and furious at the helplessness of it. We began the traverse. Step, clip, step, clip. The rhythm became our religion. I kept my gaze down, watching the teeth of my crampons bite into blue ice, watching my gloves slide along the rope. My entire body was a metronome. Halfway across, the fog behind us brightened, the followers' headlamps flaring slightly, as if they'd moved closer. The pressure in the air changed again, subtle but undeniable, like an audience leaning forward in a theater. I wanted to swallow, but my throat was too dry. I wanted to cough, but I was afraid of the sound. Every human reflex became a threat. We reached a point where the line passed beneath an overhanging bulge of ice. Dorje ducked under, then Tashi, then Pemba. I followed, bending low, careful not to snag my oxygen line. Grant came after me, then Lena. As Lena moved under the ice bulge, her pack brushed the underside with a soft scrape. It wasn't loud. It was almost nothing. But behind us, the headlamps blinked, one by one, like eyes narrowing. Lena froze, her shoulders tensing. Dorje didn't even look back. He simply lifted his hand, palm down, and pressed it through the air in a slow motion that meant, keep going, keep going. Do not let your fear become a sound. Lena moved again, inch by inch, and we cleared the overhang. Then, from the fog behind the ice bulge, came a whisper that felt like it slid along the underside of my skull rather than through my ears. Ethan! My name again, soft and exact, the way my mother used to say it when she wanted to calm me down as a child. The intimacy of it made my stomach turn. I clenched my jaw until it hurt. No answer, no reaction, just rope. Another step, another clip. The whisper returned, closer now. Ethan, it's okay. It used my language, my cadence, the kind of reassurance you offer someone on a bad day. Grant's head twitched toward me, and I could see the effort it took him not to look back, not to lift his headlamp. His eyes were wide and wet, not from emotion, but from cold and altitude. Lena's gloved hand tightened on the rope so hard, her knuckles bulged under fabric. Dorje kept us moving. We descended for what felt like an endless hour, though time up there has no honest measurement. The fog thinned and thickened in waves. The wind grew stronger, a persistent shove at our backs, as if the mountain itself wanted us lower. The headlamps behind us never vanished. They simply adjusted, staying with us like a shadow with batteries. Then the first real storm gust hit. It came sideways, slamming into us with sudden violence. Spindrift exploded off the slope, pelting our goggles and masks. The rope rattled, and for a moment the world became chaos, white particles whipping through headlamp beams, a blizzard inside a blizzard. Dorje stopped and crouched, bracing himself against the pull of the line. He motioned us to do the same. We huddled low, our bodies close, our headlamps pointed down. The wind screamed, and in that scream another sound emerged, faint, almost swallowed by the storm. A radio crackle. Not from any device in our hands, from the air. Static threaded through the gusts like a signal riding the wind, then a single click, crisp as a switch. Grant's eyes snapped wide in horror. He shook his head once, as if trying to dislodge the sound from his brain. Lena's lips moved behind her mask. Silent words, counting, praying, bargaining. Dorje looked straight ahead, his posture rigid, and I realized he was listening for something specific, like a hunter listening for the difference between wind and footsteps. The wind eased slightly. The spindrift softened, and through the fog, downhill now, a faint glow appeared, warm, yellowish, camp thread. It should have filled me with relief, but something about the light felt wrong, too steady, too inviting, like a porch light turned on for someone who shouldn't be coming home. Dorje didn't celebrate. He simply pushed forward, dragging us downhill with a grim determination that bordered on desperation. As we approached, the shapes of tents emerged. Low domes, half-buried, lines taut, fabrics snapping. A few headlamps moved around. Real people, real motion, real chaos. Someone shouted in a language I didn't understand, and the raw humanity of it nearly made me cry. We stumbled into the camp perimeter, clipped to the rope, hunched, exhausted. A Sherpa from Dorje's broader team ran toward us, his face alarmed. "Dorje, you're back early. What happened?" Dorje held up a hand, cutting him off before he could say more. "Quiet," Dorje said sharply. "No talking. Get them inside, now." The Sherpa looked confused, then saw Dorje's eyes and obeyed instantly. He grabbed my shoulder and guided me toward a tent, helping me unclip and duck inside. The interior was dim, cramped, smelling of sweat and fuel. Frost lined the seams. My hands shook as I tried to sit. Grant followed, then Lena. Dorje came last, ducking in quickly, zipping the flap shut behind him. For a moment the small space felt like a lifeboat. The roar of wind muffled. The fog outside became an abstract menace rather than a presence at our backs. Lena ripped off one glove and checked her fingers, flexing them slowly. Her eyes were sharp, clinical, trying to reclaim control. "We need to assess oxygen and temperature," she said, voice steady but kept low. "No one's sleeping until—" Dorje raised a finger to his lips. His gaze went to the tent wall, as if he could see through fabric. "Inside," he whispered. "Still listen. Still quiet." Grant's patience finally snapped. He leaned forward, voice forced low but vibrating with rage. "You want us to stop breathing too? Dorje, what is this thing? Is it a person, a team, some kind of prank? Because I swear to God," Dorje's eyes flashed. "No God," he said. "Only mountain." Grant clenched his fists. "Then tell us the rules." Dorje hesitated. He looked at each of us, as if weighing whether knowledge would help or harm. Then he spoke, barely above a whisper. "It is called many names," he said. "Old Sherpa say Kemper of the White. Some say the listener. Some say only don't say it." Lena's voice was gentle. "Dorje, how does it choose?" Dorje swallowed. "It chooses when you give it something. Voice, light, name." He tapped his own temple. "And memory." My stomach tightened. "Memory?" Dorje nodded once, reluctantly. "It can sound like people you know, people you miss, people you regret." His gaze drifted, unfocused, as if he were seeing something inside his own head. "It uses your inside to pull your outside." Grant scoffed, but it came out weak, unsettled. "That's not possible." Dorje looked at him with cold pity. "Then why you hurt yourself?" Grant had no answer. Lena leaned closer, her tone careful, respectful, like speaking to a patient with a wound you don't want to reopen. "Dorje, earlier, when it said your name, in your voice. Who was it copying?" Dorje's jaw clenched. His eyes glistened in the dim light. For the first time, his toughness cracked enough to show something human underneath. "My brother," he whispered. "He died in avalanche when I was young. He called me Dorje like that." He imitated the cadence without meaning to, and his face tightened in pain. On mountain, it uses his voice. It says my name like he is alive. A silence settled in the tent, heavy and reverent. Even Grant didn't have a snappy response. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. I thought of the way it had said my name like my mother used to. I hadn't heard her voice in years. Not clearly, not like that. Lena exhaled slowly. So it hunts weakness. Dorje shook his head. Not weakness, opening. He looked at me. When you shouted, you opened. Shame burned through me, hot and pointless. I was stopping you from stepping back. Dorje's eyes softened, just slightly. You tried to save. I understand. Then his expression hardened again. But now it knows you are loud for people. It will use that. Outside the tent, the wind rose again, rattling the fabric. The sound of guy lines snapping felt like teeth. Grant leaned forward, voice lower now, more honest. What do? We can't stay here forever. Dorje's answer came immediately. We go down, Camp 2, tonight. Lena's eyes widened. Tonight? In this weather? Dorje nodded. If we sleep, it has time. The sentence didn't make sense on a rational level, but it made perfect sense in the way fear does. Time is what you don't give the thing that's learning you. Grant dragged a hand over his face. You're saying it can get inside camp? Dorje didn't answer. He didn't need to. A faint sound came from outside the tent, soft, almost delicate, a zipper. Lena's eyes snapped toward the tent flap. Grant froze. I held my breath without realizing it. The zipper sound happened again, slow and careful, like someone testing it. Dorje leaned forward, pressing his ear toward the tent wall, listening with the entire focus of a man listening for a predator in tall grass. Then came a whisper, barely audible, just outside the fabric. Ethan. My blood ran cold. It was right there. Lena's lips parted in silent horror. Grant's hand drifted toward the tent flap, a reflex to confront, to attack, to do something, and Dorje caught his wrist in a vice grip. Dorje shook his head once, violently. Do not. The whisper returned, tender as a lullaby. Ethan, let me in. The words slid into the small space like smoke. I couldn't stop the tremor in my hands. My mind raced through absurd options. Pretend you didn't hear it. Hold the line. Stay silent. But the intimacy of it was unbearable. It sounded like love. It sounded like forgiveness. It sounded like the exact thing a lonely man at 26,000 feet would want to hear. Dorje leaned toward me, his eyes locked on mine, and mouthed a single word with furious emphasis. No. The zipper outside stopped. For a few seconds, there was only wind. Then the tent wall bulged inward, just slightly, as if something had leaned against it from the outside, testing the barrier with weight. Lena's eyes went wide. She pulled her knees up, making herself smaller. The bulge shifted along the side of the tent, slowly, like a hand sliding across fabric. It wasn't violent. It wasn't frantic. It was curious. Then it paused near the back corner, right behind Dorje. Dorje's shoulders tightened. And in Dorje's own voice, from inches beyond the fabric, the whisper came again. Dorje, it's me. Dorje's face went pale beneath his frost. He squeezed his eyes shut for a heartbeat, like a man bracing against a punch. His lips trembled. Grant, seeing Dorje's control slip, made the worst possible mistake. He spoke, low but sharp, driven by instinct to snap Dorje out of it. Dorje, don't listen. The moment the word Dorje left Grant's mouth, the tent went still, as if the wind had been muted. Then outside, a soft chuckle sounded. Quiet, pleased, almost amused. The zipper began to move again, faster now. Dorje's eyes flew open. Pack! He hissed. Now! We fumbled in the cramped space, shoving gear into packs, hands clumsy and numb. The tent flap shivered as the zipper slid down from the outside with deliberate intent. Lena's voice came out in a thin whisper. It's opening it. Grant's face hardened into panic anger. I'm not dying in a tent like... Dorje lunged forward and jammed his gloved fingers against the inside of the zipper line, pinning fabric together as if sheer strength could hold it closed. "No fight," he rasped. "Only move." The zipper stopped for a split second, then resumed, dragging Dorje's glove with it like something on the other side was stronger, more patient, and infinitely less afraid of the cold. A thin gap opened at the edge of the flap, and a sliver of fog seeped into the tent. Cold, dense, smelling faintly of old ice and something metallic. In that narrow gap, a circle of headlamp light appeared, steady, white, aimed directly into our shelter. But there was no face behind it, just light in fog, like an eye without a body. Dorje's voice cracked with urgency. "Out back," he whispered. "Cut tent." He pulled a small blade from his harness, something practical climbers carry for emergencies, and shoved it into my hand. "Cut," he mouthed. "Now." My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped it. I pressed the blade to the tent wall behind me and sliced. The fabric gave with a tearing sound that felt deafening in the silence. I cut again, widening the slit. Cold air rushed in. Lena crawled first, then Grant, then me. Dorje held the front flap with both hands, fighting the zipper's pull while we escaped through the back like rats out of a trap. Outside, the wind slapped me hard, stealing breath. The fog swirled, lit by headlamps from nearby tents where real climbers stood confused and alarmed, yelling questions. But Dorje didn't let us join them. He grabbed my harness and yanked me toward the fixed line leading downhill, dragging us away from the cluster of lights. Behind us, the tent flap opened fully. The headlamp light poured into the empty shelter, and in the open doorway, a figure stood, tall, still outlined by fog and glare. For a split second, it looked like a climber. Then it tilted its head, slowly, as if recognizing the scent of our fear. And it spoke softly into the camp, carrying its voice just far enough to be heard by every human ear nearby. "Where are you going?" It used Dorje's voice. Dorje shoved us onto the rope. "Down!" he hissed. "No matter what you hear. Down!" We began descending out of Camp 3 into the storm, faster than any sane team would move in those conditions. Above us, the camp's headlamps flickered in fog like a sinking ship's lights. And behind us, on the edge of visibility, new headlamps ignited one after another, joining the first, forming a patient line that began to follow. But now they weren't keeping distance. Now they were closing in. And as we dropped into the white, I heard my mother's voice again, clearer than ever, warm and pleading, speaking from the fog just beside my ear. "Ethan, please, stop." I felt my boots hesitate on the ice. Dorje's hand clamped onto my harness like a steel hook. And in the storm, with the rope trembling beneath us, I realized the most dangerous part of the mountain wasn't what was behind us. It was what it could make us hear in front of us, right where the next step should be. The descent out of Camp 3 felt like falling through a hallway with no walls. The fixed line was the only thing that made the world real. Everything else, fog, wind, spindrift, the pale glare of headlamps behind us, was a shifting illusion that wanted my feet to believe there was solid ground where there was only air. Dorje kept one hand on the rope and the other on my harness, as if he didn't trust my mind to stay inside my body. "Down," he repeated, not loud, not dramatic, just constant like a metronome. "Only down." My mother's voice stayed near my ear, warm and pleading. "Ethan, stop. You're tired. Just stop." It was the most dangerous sound I'd ever heard because it matched the exact shape of what my body wanted. My thighs were shaking, my calves cramped, my lungs felt shredded. A single pause, 1 minute of rest, could become an hour, and an hour up here could become a coffin. I forced my eyes to the rope, to my crampons, to the next knot of ice. Step, clip, step, clip. Behind us, the headlamps moved closer, not charging, not scrambling, closing with certainty. Grant kept glancing sideways, his eyes darting like he was trying to catch a glimpse without breaking Dorje's rule. Every time he did, Dorje tightened his grip on Grant's harness, pulling him back into alignment like a man correcting a dog that keeps straining toward the woods. Lena stayed silent, but I could hear her breathing falter and correct. Falter and correct. Professional composure fighting panic. She kept one hand on her chest strap as if she needed the pressure to remind herself she was still there. The wind rose again, and the fog thickened until our headlamps turned into small, helpless circles. The slope steepened. We were on the Lhotse face now. Hard blue ice under a skin of snow, angled enough that one mistake didn't mean a fall. It meant a slide that would not stop. Dorje halted abruptly. We froze in a tight cluster, our bodies pitched into the slope, weight on points. Dorje leaned forward, listening, not with his ears, but with his entire posture. Tashi and Pemba mirrored him. The three of them became still in a way I'd only seen animals do when they sensed something moving in tall grass. Then Dorje pointed downhill. Two faint lights blinked in the fog below, headlamps, real ones, moving unevenly. A team. Relief hit me so hard my knees almost buckled. But Dorje didn't relax. His jaw tightened. The headlamps below flickered again. A voice drifted up through the fog, thin but human. "Hello? Up there? Are you okay?" Grant's entire body leaned toward the sound, desperate for normal. His mouth opened. Dorje's hand clamped over the front of Grant's mask for a split second, not sealing it, just blocking the instinct to speak. Dorje's eyes said everything. "This is how it gets you." The voice below called again. "We can help. Come down toward our lights." Lena's eyes narrowed behind her goggles. She whispered, barely moving her lips, "That's too perfect." Dorje nodded once, because the lights below were steady in the wrong way. They moved, but not like men on ice. They didn't bob with fatigue or stumble. They rose and fell with a smoothness that looked rehearsed. Dorje leaned toward us. "Follow rope," he whispered. "Not voices. Rope is truth." Then he did something that chilled me more than the fog. He unhooked a small, bright marker tag from his gear, a reflective strip teams use for visibility, and shoved it into his pocket. "No extra light," he murmured. We become small. We started down again, and the headlamps below seemed to drift sideways, staying at a distance, as if guiding us into a slightly different line, one that would peel away from the fixed rope. The voice below softened, warmer now, persuasive. "Dorje, it's safer here." Grant's eyes went wide. He heard it too. Dorje's name, spoken in a calm, familiar cadence. Dorje's grip on the rope tightened until the line trembled. We passed a place where the fixed route kinked, left around a bulge of ice. The fog thinned for a moment, and I saw the truth. The two lights below were not on the rope line. They floated several meters away, where the slope dropped into a featureless white emptiness. A wrong path, a clean invitation into nothing. Dorje hissed once, an angry breath, and tugged us hard along the correct line. The moment we committed to the rope, the lights below blinked out simultaneously, like someone turning off a pair of switches. And in the darkness where they had been, a low, satisfied exhale rolled up the slope. Then the voices began to change. They stopped sounding like strangers calling for help. They started sounding like people we loved. A man's voice behind me, my father's voice, a sound I hadn't heard since I was a teenager, said my name the way he used to when he was disappointed. "Ethan, you always run when it gets hard." My stomach clenched with a grief so sharp I nearly cried into my mask. My father wasn't a comforting memory, he was a wound, and whatever was behind us had found it with surgical precision. Lena stiffened suddenly. Her head tilted slightly, as if someone had spoken directly into her ear. "Lena," a woman's voice whispered from the fog. "Come here, I'm cold." Lena's breath hitched, her hands tightened on the rope. Dorje reached back and slapped Lena's forearm. Hard, a physical interruption. Not cruel, necessary. Lena blinked rapidly, as if waking from a trance, and clung to the line again. The fog pressed closer. The headlamps behind us brightened again. Now more of them. a faint arc of steady lights that made my skin crawl, even without seeing bodies. We descended in silence for a long time. My world narrowed to the rope and the ache in my legs. Each step was a negotiation with exhaustion. Then the rope ahead dipped sharply into a steeper section with ice anchors. Dorje clipped down fast. Tashi and Pemba followed. I went next, careful, lowering myself with trembling arms. Grant came after me, and on the second anchor, his glove slipped. Just a small slip, enough to make his crampon skate an inch. Grant's body jerked and a grunt tore out of him, pure reflex. Instantly, from the fog behind, that same grunt echoed back. Perfect timing, perfect pitch. Then another, and another, as if several mouths were testing the sound, repeating it, enjoying it. Grant's eyes went wild. Panic rushed into him. His hands clawed at the rope too fast, too rough. "Don't!" he rasped, and Dorje snapped his head around. Dorje didn't speak. He reached up and grabbed Grant's wrist with an iron grip, forcing his hand back into correct position on the rope. Grant's breathing went ragged, his oxygen hissing louder. The fog behind us pulsed with light as the headlamps moved closer, close enough now that the glow spilled faintly onto the ice around our feet. Then softly, sweetly, in Grant's own voice, a whisper drifted forward. "Let go." Grant's face went pale beneath frost. His eyes widened in a look that wasn't just fear, it was betrayal, as if his own mind had turned against him. Dorje leaned toward Grant until their masks nearly touched. Dorje whispered something in Nepali, short, urgent, and Tashi immediately reached forward and clipped a secondary tether from Grant's harness to the rope, an extra line, a backup, a refusal to let Grant become one more missing bootprint in the white. We pushed down harder after that. No pauses. No, just a minute. Dorje drove us like men fleeing a fire. Hours blurred. The slope eased gradually. The fog began to thin in uneven patches, and with it came a different kind of danger, visibility that teased you into thinking you were safe. At one point, the cloud broke enough for me to see the western Sibaduem below, a vast, frozen valley of ice and shadow. The scale of it made my chest tighten. In clear weather, it's beautiful. In this half-light, it looked like a mouth. Camp 2's lights were faint but real, tiny, trembling dots far below, moving with human inconsistency. Relief flickered again, cautious now. Dorje didn't slow. Then the cruelest thing happened. The fog behind us went quiet. The headlamps vanished. The voices stopped. For nearly 10 minutes, there was only wind and our breathing. It felt like a mercy, and that's why it worked. My body relaxed, just a fraction. My mind began to hope. Grant's shoulders dropped. Lena's breathing steadied. Dorje stayed tense, eyes narrowed as if he didn't trust peace. We reached a small plateau, where teams sometimes paused to reorganize before the last descent into Camp 2. The rope here was less steep, the ice less aggressive. For the first time in hours, standing upright didn't feel like a lie. Grant made a sound, half laugh, half sob, right at the edge of relief. "It's gone," he whispered, unable to stop himself. Dorje's head snapped to him, furious. But before Dorje could react, a voice came from below, clear, real, close, like someone standing just out of sight. "Grant?" Grant froze. The voice was male, American, familiar, and utterly believable. Grant's eyes filled with something I hadn't seen in him yet, longing. "Who's there?" Grant called, louder than he should have. Dorje lunged, but it was too late. The sound was out. The voice below answered, gentle and intimate. "It's me, Mark." Grant went rigid, as if the name had punched him. Lena's eyes widened sharply. "Grant!" Grant's mouth trembled. "Mark was my buddy," he whispered, voice cracking. He swallowed hard. "He died." Dorje's expression went flat with dread, because this wasn't random. It wasn't guesswork. It was precision. Grant took one step downhill off the exact line of the rope toward the sound. Dorje grabbed his harness and yanked him back. Grant fought him, actually fought him, like a drowning man fighting the person trying to save him. "Let go," he choked. "He's right there." Lena reached forward and grabbed Grant's arm. "Grant, listen to me, it's not him." Grant's eyes were wild and wet. "You don't know that." The voice below softened, using the tone of a close friend in the dark. "Grant, I'm stuck. I can't move. Just come a little closer." Grant's breath broke. He leaned forward again. Dorje did something brutal and necessary. He slapped Grant across the side of the mask, hard enough to snap his headlamp beam downward and jolt him. "Wake!" Dorje hissed. "Wake, now!" Grant blinked, disoriented, shocked by the violence. In that split second of confusion, Dorje clipped Grant's secondary tether shorter, locking him physically to the rope. Grant made a strangled sound of rage and heartbreak, and the voice below laughed. Not loudly, just a soft, pleased chuckle, like a child enjoying a game. Then the fog around our boots trembled, and a low vibration rose through the ice again. Something heavy was moving uphill, fast. Dorje's face tightened. "Move!" he barked. Actual volume now, risking everything, but choosing speed over silence. "Move!" We descended in a near run, half sliding, half stepping, hands burning from rope friction, lungs screaming. Camp 2 lights grew larger, clearer, human. Behind us, the fog returned in a rush, as if it had only stepped away to bait us, and now it was done playing gentle. Headlamps ignited again in the cloud, more than before, and the voices returned, not one, not two, but layered. My mother, my father, a friend from my past, a co-worker, a dozen echoes all trying different doors in my mind at once. "Ethan, stop! Ethan, you can't do this! Ethan, turn around!" The overlap made my stomach twist. It was like being inside a room where every person you ever disappointed was calling your name. Lena began to sob silently, tears freezing at the edges of her goggles. She didn't stop moving. She just cried while she climbed down, a fierce, unstoppable leak of fear and exhaustion. Grant's anger turned into a low, animal panic. He kept glancing back, even though Dorje kept snapping his hand down. Grant's headlamp shook, making the fog behind us ripple with light. Dorje shoved him forward. "No, look!" he growled. "No, look!" At last, Camp 2 swallowed us. Real voices, real movement, real chaos. Sherpas and climbers rushed toward us, grabbing shoulders, guiding us between tents. Someone shouted questions. Someone tried to hand us water. Someone's headlamp flared directly into my face, and for a second I couldn't tell if the light was human or not. My body flinched like an animal. Dorje dragged us into a larger medical tent, where the air was warmer and smelled of fuel. People were talking, moving, doing normal things. The normality felt unreal after the fog. A doctor from another team stepped forward. "What happened? You're descending from—" Dorje cut him off with a raised hand. "Quiet," he said, voice low but commanding. "No names." The doctor frowned, confused. Grant barked a bitter laugh, half hysterical. "Yeah, no names, no talking, no breathing. You got any other rules?" Dorje rounded on him. His eyes were fierce and tired. "You want live?" Dorje said. "Then follow." The doctor tried again, calmer. "Dorje, people need facts. Were you hit by hypoxia? Hallucinations?" Lena snapped, voice shaking but sharp. "Stop. Just stop." Everyone stared at her. Lena wiped her cheek with a trembling hand. "We're going down," she said. "All the way. Tonight, if we can." A murmur rippled through the tent. People hate descending when a summit window is open. Pride and money and ego are heavy at altitude. Grant's jaw clenched. "I'm not done," he muttered, more to himself than anyone. "I'm not leaving without—" Dorje stepped close, his voice deadly calm. "You already almost left," he said, "into fog." That shut Grant up. We rested only long enough to swap oxygen bottles and regain enough coordination to move. Dorje refused to let us sleep. He kept us together, clipped and organized, and pushed us down toward Camp Y, then through the Khumbu icefall's lower sections where crevasses yawned like mouths and ladders spanned gaps that looked like black space. The icefall was terrifying in a normal way. It was physics, not whispers. The sound of cracking seracs was honest danger. My mind clung to it gratefully, and as we dropped lower, the voices faded, not instantly, but gradually, like a radio signal losing range. By the time we reached base camp, the sky was brighter, the air thicker, and my body felt like it had been beaten with a hammer. People rushed to us. They asked questions. They said our names. Dorje flinched at the first one, like a man hearing a gunshot. Then he exhaled slowly and let it pass. The listener, if that's what it was, didn't follow us here, or couldn't, or chose not to. We stumbled into a heated tent. I sank onto a foam pad and realized my hands were shaking uncontrollably, not from cold now, but from the delayed collapse of adrenaline. Grant sat across from me, staring at his gloves like he didn't recognize them. Lena drank warm tea in small sips, her eyes distant. Dorje stayed standing, watching the tent flap as if expecting fog to pour through it. Finally, when the camp noise softened and our breathing slowed, I found my voice again. Carefully, like testing whether speaking would trigger something. "Dorje," I said quietly, "why did it want us to turn around? Why not just take us?" Dorje's eyes flicked to me. He looked exhausted beyond words. "It does not take like tiger," he said. "It invites. It waits for you to give yourself." Grant's voice came out hoarse. "So we just never go back?" Dorje didn't answer immediately. He looked down at his hands. "Mountain always asks," he said. "Some people always answer." Lena set her cup down with a soft clink. "Do you think it was hallucination?" she asked. Not like a skeptic, but like a doctor, desperate to put the world back into categories. Dorje met her gaze. "Hallucination does not follow rope," he said. "Hallucination does not know your dead friend name." Grant flinched. Silence settled again. In that quiet I realized something. The mountain had not only tried to kill us, it had tried to use what we loved and regretted to make us kill ourselves. I thought of my mother's voice in my ear, pleading. I thought of how close I came to stopping, of how comforting it sounded, and I hated myself for how badly I wanted to believe it. A few hours later, after dawn, a helicopter thumped in and out, ferrying injured climbers and gear. People talked about weather and summit pushes. Life continued because that's what base camp does. It absorbs horror and turns it into logistics. Dorje left our tent to speak with the expedition leader. When he returned, his face was set. "We leave," he said. "Today." Grant stared at him, anger rising again out of shame. "You're really walking away?" Dorje nodded. "I am walking to life." Grant's mouth opened, then closed. He looked away. The fight had leaked out of him. What remained was grief for a summit that would never happen, and gratitude that he was alive to grieve it. We packed. Before we left, Dorje did something unexpected. He asked for my dead radio handset, the one he'd torn the battery from. I handed it to him. He carried it outside. I followed at a distance. The air was crisp and bright, the kind of clarity that makes the summit seem like a dream you could still reach if you just changed your mind. Dorje walked to a pile of discarded gear, broken crates, torn straps, old oxygen masks, and placed the radio on top, like an offering. Then he took a strip of white tape and wrote something on it in thick black marker. He stuck the tape over the radio's speaker grill. I stepped closer. "What did you write?" Dorje didn't look at me. "No name," he said. I saw the tape. It was blank. He had written nothing at all. Then he turned and walked away without another word. We trekked out over the next days, descending through ice and rock into thinner danger and thicker air. The world regained color. My mind regained logic. I began to believe, against my own memory, that maybe it really was hypoxia. Maybe the fog had simply turned our fear into a shared nightmare. On the flight home, I stared out the window at clouds and tried to let the story shrink into something I could carry. Then, halfway across the ocean, an overhead speaker crackled. Just a harmless airline announcement, but in the static between words, I heard a sound that froze my blood. A clean, mechanical click, like a radio transmit button being pressed. I sat up too fast, heart hammering. The passenger beside me glanced over, annoyed. The cabin was calm, people slept. A child laughed softly 2 rows back. Nothing was wrong. And yet, deep in the white noise of the plane, I could swear I heard my name, faint, breathy, almost curious, woven into the static like a signal trying to find a channel. Ethan. I didn't answer. I kept my eyes forward, hands clenched on the armrests, and I watched the seatbelt sign glow, steady in the dark, one small circle of light, while the clouds outside looked for the first time exactly like fog.